So you want to own a casino. Picture it. Neon lights, 100 slot machines humming at once, high rollers sliding chips across green felt while you watch from a private balcony, knowing every dollar that touches that floor eventually finds its way to you. It's one of the oldest fantasies of wealth there is. The house always wins, right? Here's what that fantasy actually costs you. Before a single card is dealt, before a single coin drops into a slot tray, you are already tens of millions of dollars into a hole. Depending on scale and location, a full casino resort can require anywhere from $50 million to over $1 billion just to open the doors. That's not an exaggeration. That's the entry fee. So where does all that money actually go? Start with the land. A casino needs a massive footprint: parking, gaming floor, hotel towers, restaurants, event space. In a major gaming market, prime real estate alone can run into the tens of millions, and that's before you've poured a single foundation. Then comes construction. Casino buildings are not simple structures. You need reinforced flooring to support the weight of slot machines and vault systems. You need specialized electrical infrastructure to run thousands of machines simultaneously, all connected to central monitoring systems. You need climate control precise enough to keep gamblers comfortable for 12, 16, sometimes 24 hours straight, because comfort keeps people playing. Construction costs for a mid-sized casino resort can easily land somewhere between $200 million and $500 million, and that range balloons fast if you're adding a hotel tower, a convention center, or a theater. And then there's the piece most people forget entirely: the license. A gaming license isn't something you simply apply for and receive. In many jurisdictions, it's auctioned, capped in number, or tied to political approval processes that can take years. Some states have only a handful of licenses available, ever. Depending on the jurisdiction, licensing fees alone can range from a few $1,000,000 to over $100 million. And that's assuming you're approved at all. You also need equipment. Slot machines aren't cheap. A single unit can cost $10,000 to $25,000, and a mid-sized floor might carry over 1,000 of them. Table games need custom-built furniture, security-grade card shufflers, chip inventories that are tracked down to the individual chip, added up, and equipping the floor alone can run into the tens of millions. So before you've made a single dollar, you're carrying a capital investment that rivals building a small city block. Still feeling like the fantasy? Now let's talk about keeping the lights on, because a casino doesn't sleep and neither do its costs. Staffing is enormous. Dealers, pit bosses, security, surveillance technicians, cage cashiers, valet, housekeeping, food service. A full resort casino can employ anywhere from a few hundred to several thousand people. Payroll alone can consume 20 to 30% of total operating costs in a given year. Security and surveillance aren't optional line items, they're existential. Casinos run some of the most sophisticated camera networks in the private sector, sometimes with more surveillance points than a small airport. That infrastructure, plus the trained staff to monitor it around the clock, can run into the millions annually. Then there are comps. Free rooms, free meals, free show tickets. It looks generous. It's actually a precisely calculated cost of doing business, designed to keep your highest value players on the floor longer. Comp programs can eat up a meaningful slice of gaming revenue, sometimes in the range of 10 to 20%, depending on how aggressively you're courting high rollers. Utilities alone are staggering. Keeping a windowless gaming floor lit 24 hours a day, climate-controlled year-round, with thousands of machines drawing power constantly, can push annual utility costs into the millions for a large property. And don't forget insurance. Between liability coverage, property insurance on a building full of cash and valuables, and specialized coverage for gaming operations themselves, premiums for a casino resort can be substantially higher than almost any other commercial property type. So where does the money actually come back to you? Table games and slot machines are the obvious answer, but here's the twist most people don't expect. Slots typically generate a larger share of total gaming revenue than table games in most American casinos. Why? Lower overhead per unit, higher volume, and a house edge that's mathematically locked in your favor on every single spin. Hotel rooms are the second major stream. In a resort casino model, rooms are often priced not to maximize hotel profit, but to maximize time spent on the gaming floor. A cheap room with a great location often earns you more in gaming losses than it would in rack rate. Food and beverage is another stream, though margins here tend to be thinner, often used as a loss leader to keep guests on property rather than as a primary profit center. Then there's entertainment. Concerts, shows, conventions, which pulls in a different customer entirely and extends your revenue beyond gambling alone. And finally, there are membership and loyalty programs, which might not look like revenue on the surface but function as retention machines, feeding your highest spending players back to the floor again and again. Which raises the real question: with all these revenue streams, why do so many casinos still struggle to turn a profit? Because the margins are thinner than the fantasy suggests. Industry data compiled by groups like the American Gaming Association has shown that even in strong years, a large share of casino revenue gets absorbed right back into operating costs, debt service, and reinvestment into the property itself. Profit margins for casino resorts often land somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% of gross revenue, and that's before accounting for the enormous debt many properties carry from construction. ROI timelines reflect that reality. A well-run casino resort might take anywhere from 7 to 15 years to fully recoup its initial capital investment. Some take longer. Some, especially in oversaturated markets, never fully recover it at all. So what actually kills these businesses? Regulation is the first and biggest risk. Gaming laws can change overnight. Tax rates on gross gaming revenue can be raised. New competitor licenses can be approved nearby. Smoking bans can reduce time on device for slot players. You don't just compete against other casinos. You compete against the political mood of the jurisdiction you're operating in. Market saturation is the second killer. Casinos are capital-intensive and geographically fixed. You can't relocate a billion-dollar building if a bigger, shinier competitor opens 2 miles down the road. Regional gaming markets in particular have seen this play out, new supply entering a market and eroding revenue per property across the board. Then there's the reputational and legal exposure tied to problem gambling. Casinos operate under increasing scrutiny around responsible gaming practices, and lawsuits or regulatory penalties tied to failures in that area can be financially devastating, not to mention reputationally toxic. Economic downturns hit especially hard. Gaming is discretionary spending, and discretionary spending is the first thing consumers cut when money gets tight. During the 2008 financial crisis, several major gaming markets saw sustained multi-year revenue declines as consumer spending contracted broadly, and debt. Because these projects are so capital-intensive, most casinos are financed with significant leverage. When revenue dips even modestly, debt obligations don't dip with it. That mismatch has driven multiple well-known Atlantic City properties into bankruptcy over the past 2 decades, some of them multiple times over. Let's ground this in a real example, one that doesn't need a name attached because the pattern has repeated itself across markets. Consider a mid-sized regional casino that opens in a state legalizing gaming for the first time. Early years look incredible. Pent-up demand, minimal competition, revenue exceeding projections. Then, a few years in, a neighboring state legalizes gaming too. A new competitor opens 40 minutes away. Suddenly your customer base is split in half, your revenue drops 20 to 30% almost overnight, and the debt payments calculated off those early boom years don't adjust downward with it. This exact story has played out across regional gaming markets in the US over the past 15 years, and it's one of the clearest illustrations of why first-mover advantage in gaming is often temporary, not permanent. One quick note before we get to the verdict: every number in this video is an educational estimate drawn from general industry patterns, not precise financial or investment guidance, and none of it should be treated as advice for an actual business decision. So, knowing all of that, the 9-figure entry cost, the razor-thin margins, the decade-long payback window, the regulatory sword hanging over every good year, would you still want to own a casino? Maybe you would. There's real money at the top of this industry, and the biggest operators in the world have built empires on exactly this model. But it's not a fantasy of easy money. It's a capital-intensive, tightly regulated, brutally competitive business that happens to have a glamorous lobby.